Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel for another video today. This one is going to be another Melee related video, so if you aren't aware, or maybe you're not a member of the scene, or just maybe you're somehow in the dark about all this past weekend over on Twitch, the brand new Super Smash Bros. Documentary called Metagame was premiered over the course of 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It was 8 episodes long, and yeah, if you don't know what the Super Smash Bros. Documentary is, the original Smash Bros. Documentary, it was a documentary that came out about Melee that basically showcased what the game was, the people involved in the game, and why we love it so much, even though it was such a small scene at the time. And the result of that doc coming out resulted in and I mean like a metric boatload of people coming to the game and starting to play Melee, coming to tournaments, watching the game online, whatever it was. Basically, it had a huge hand in blowing the game up. And so this new one that came out recently, the first documentary came out in 2013. It's now 2020. It's been quite a long time since the last one, so a lot of people were very excited for it, and it was a great experience, if I'm gonna be honest. Spoiler alert a little bit. I liked it a lot, but there was a lot of points of contention during the broadcast of it, because like I said, it was split up. All the 8 episodes were split up into 3 different days, so each day had people talking about it on like social medias and stuff, and there was a lot of people who had some issues with it. So I wanted to kind of talk about that today and just give my kind of viewpoint on the whole documentary and what went on with that. But first and foremost, in the background, the video that I'm playing is actually probably my favorite Melee set of all time. It's Mango versus Leffen at Genesis 4 Losers Quarterfinals. If you've never seen this set, man, if you're not into Melee, this is the type of set that will get you into Melee. I think this is like the epitome of what the game is. I love this set so much. But the original video for it will be linked down below if you are interested in watching the whole thing. But the documentary was premiering, and like I said, a lot of people had some issues with it. The reason I kind of chose the set to put on in the background was because the main 2 points or people that had some issues with it were Mango and Leffen. Mainly Leffen, and a little bit Mango too. So over the course of the 3 days, on Friday, the doc started and they premiered the first 3 episodes, and it was telling the story of the 5 gods. If you don't know Melee, there was 5 players who were just the best in the game for, I mean, years. They didn't, between those 5 players, over the course of years, only one of those 5 would win every tournament, pretty much. No one other than those 5 would win a tournament, so they became known as the 5 gods. And that was basically what the documentary was all about. It was about these 5 players, their journey to becoming the 5 gods, and kind of also their downfall as the 5 gods. Well, I guess we'll get into that later. But the first 3 episodes aired, and it was basically an introduction of the 5 gods and why they were cool, why they earned the spot as the 5 best players, how they interacted with each other, and things like that. And through the first day, everybody pretty much had a great view of the doc. Everybody liked it. They thought the storylines were great. They thought it was basically an improved version of the original doc, because the original doc had also some people who didn't enjoy it. While it did grow the game exponentially and a lot of people loved it, there were some people who disliked it and had some issues with it. But it seemed like on the first day that a lot of those issues were getting fixed. A lot of the narrative issues were better, a lot of the character issues were better, and people were loving it. Then we moved into the second day, and immediately upon the 4th episode, people were having kind of a lot of issues. Now, I personally think the issues weren't as bad as people made them out to be, but maybe that's just me. Basically, in the 4th episode, it was talking about there was an area where Mango used some homophobic slurs. Now, I will say, in Mango's defense, this was in like 2013, or like a long time ago, years and years and years ago, when the environment was very different. It wasn't necessarily wrong to say those things like it was, or like it is nowadays. So just in his defense, not to mention, basically anybody in the scene will tell you, Mango's one of the nicest people that they've ever met. He's a great guy. He doesn't use that kind of language anymore. You know, times were just different back then. But the main issue people had with it was there was other people getting censored for saying certain things, but he wasn't. And they found that odd, and they didn't really like it that much, and it kind of made Mango seem like, without lack of a better term, kind of a piece of shit. And people didn't like that because, like I said, most people who know Mango would see him as a great guy, especially if you watch his streams and stuff. He's just an all-around fun guy. He's a good guy, though. And this scene kind of made it out to be like he wasn't. And people took a lot of issue with that. But, you know, it wasn't too long in the documentary. It only took up a couple minutes. You know, people moved past it. And the rest of the episode seemed fine. And then we kind of moved on to episodes 5 and 6, where Leffen was introduced. Now, Leffen was introduced because, if you don't, again, know Melee storylines, Leffen came into the scene as, basically, he painted himself as the villain, as the antagonist of the scene. He wanted to slay all the 5 gods. He wanted to beat them all and prove that he was the best. And that was kind of the narrative that they wanted to go with in the documentary, was these are the 5 gods, this is why they were gods, and this guy Leffen comes in and beats all 5 of them and kind of tears down that aspect of these are the 5 best players, and gives the game that feeling of, oh yes, these are the 5 best, but that doesn't mean you can't be better than them or you can't beat them anymore. That time has come and gone sort of vibe. Now, the issue with that was in the past, kind of before that, while Leffen was still painting himself as the villain, if you will, and while, keep in mind, again, he was 15 years old, he made some questionable decisions. He made some comments that were not very great. They were a little bit just straight up douchebaggy, and like there was a point where he kind of sounded like he made fun of a disabled person, and obviously Leffen took offense to that because while yes, he was not the best person back in this time period, again, he was 15 years old, you know, and it was years and years and years ago, and since then Leffen has become one of the most popular streamers and figures in the community, and everybody likes the guy. He seems to be a very stand-up guy and a guy that people get along with and like. Obviously, he still has some flaws, you know, he still speaks his mind to a fault sometimes. Example recently being that whole thing he was trending on Twitter for saying streaming's harder than working at McDonald's. But, you know, in his defense, it's always one-off comments like that. He's not overall a bad guy, I would say. I think most people would agree. He's a pretty nice guy. He gets along well with pretty much everybody. It just occasionally has some bad takes, but everybody does, right? And again, in the documentary when it was being filmed, he was 15 years old when all that stuff happened. So it painted him to be like basically a gigantic piece of shit who makes fun of like handicapped people in the documentary, which obviously everybody didn't really like because again, we all see him as kind of a nice guy now. He's improved a lot. He's changed a lot. He learned from his past mistakes when he was young and he's become a better person for it. But the documentary didn't really show that aspect of it. They only really showed the part where he was the bad guy. And, you know, people didn't really like that. And as the documentary continued, there was just little things like that people were really big fans of. Every time Leffen would win, sad music would play, and every time somebody else would win, some hype music would play. And there was a point where PPMD, one of the 5 gods, kind of made Mango to be like a giant bully and like not a good guy. And again, just painted these two in kind of a bad light throughout the rest of the doc. Now, from my point of view, I said it earlier in the video, I still really don't think it was as bad as people think. I think the Mango slur thing, while pretty bad, it didn't take up too much time. They moved past it pretty quickly, and for the rest of the doc, he looked really cool. Like the first 3 episodes painted him in a really cool light, made him seem like a fun guy to be around, a nice guy, and a guy who's just really good at the game and cared about the game a lot. And I think the other episodes kind of did that as well. Even though there was like the thing where PP kind of painted him to be a bully, that at the end of the day, that's kind of just his opinion, you know? It's not really like an objective fact, right? He can say, oh, this is how he made me feel, but that doesn't mean he's a bad person or anything. And Samox, the creator of the documentary, later went on Twitter and said, you know, I see what you guys are saying. I apologize. I'm going to remove the parts with Mango using the slurs and with the evidence.zip, which was the stuff that left all of Leffen's comments about like the handicap and all that kind of stuff. So he was going to remove that from the later on release of the documentary because this documentary was all live streamed on Twitch, but nothing was saved, and the actual documentary is going to go over on Vimeo and you can pay for it and watch it there. So he was like, I'm going to remove it. I'm going to edit those parts out, which, you know, is not perfect solution because Leffen stated this himself. Yes, it's better than nothing at all. Like, it's better to cut that part out and say, okay, I probably shouldn't have included that, my mistake. But the live stream already happened, and there was a lot of eyes on those live streams. I think it was like at least 60K in total through 2 different streams of people who saw these parts and maybe got the wrong idea about Leffen. But I will say, for the most part, from what I've seen, nobody really thinks that he is the bad guy here. Like, I think most people who have seen it understand the fact that Leffen is not this gigantic piece of shit who makes fun of handicapped people, because they know who he is. He's a gigantic figure in the scene. He's a big streamer. He's not like a nobody like maybe he was back in the original doc. His personality is bigger than the documentary now. People know who he is. He's a part of a big organization. They know what he's about, right? So most of the stuff I heard on Twitter was people saying, okay, that probably wasn't right because Leffen's really not what you painted him to be. And the same thing with Mango, which is always good because you would not want a lot of people to see this and think that they are like pieces of shit, because they're really not. And that includes Mango and Leffen. So that's good. But again, people just weren't too happy about it. But I think with the removal of those scenes, it will paint a better picture of both of them. As for like the sad music when Leffen wins and hype music when he loses and stuff, I think that's kind of hard to handle, because the making of the documentary, this started filming right after the first documentary ended, which again was years and years and years ago, long time ago. And this has been in production for like 5 years. The final day of filming was Apex 2015. That was the last scene that they filmed for the documentary in 2015, and it's just now coming out in 2020. This is basically a solo project by Samox. He spent 5 years basically by himself perfecting this documentary, at least in his eyes, trying to perfect it. So to say it, that's all to say basically that the narrative prediction was hard for him, I think, and I think that is clearly seen if you watch the documentary, because the documentary, I'm just gonna rewind this here, we'll watch it again. The feel that he was going for in the documentary was, these are the 5 gods, here's why they became popular, and here's this guy Leffen, and he was the one that made them not the gods anymore, but seen more as just players who can be beaten if you try hard enough and if you are good enough. And that narrative, I think it's a good narrative. I think it would have worked. And I kind of am jacking this from Ludwig a little bit, but I think his point is very valid, and I think it was kind of something a lot of people agreed on. The reason the narrative doesn't really work that way is because at Apex 2015, Leffen finally beat the last god that he hadn't beaten yet, Mewtwo King. But the issue was he didn't win the tournament. He actually lost. He placed 3rd, which, I mean, I guess, spoiler alert, I don't really know, but it's been a long time. But if he had won, then this narrative works tremendously, right? Then it's like, oh my god, Leffen did it. He vanquished the 5 gods. He became the best player. But the issue was that didn't happen. So that narrative that Samox had molded throughout the years and years of filming, which is basically him just trying to predict what's going to happen at this point, because he doesn't know. Nobody knew at the time what was going to happen. For all we knew, the 5 gods were going to basically rule the game forevermore. You know, it was always hard to tell. There was never going to be an easy, clear-cut answer on what direction to take the documentary in, because you don't know what's going to happen. And because Leffen lost in that tournament, which was again the final day of filming was that tournament, the narrative became, well, shoot, we can't push the narrative that Leffen would like vanquish the gods and, you know, change the game forever, because he kind of didn't. In a lot of ways he did, in different ways, but that narrative that Samox was trying to mold throughout the documentary doesn't work anymore, because PPMD won the tournament. So instead, PPMD must become the protagonist now, and he must be the main focus of the documentary, and like a lot of aspects of his life has to become the main focus, instead of maybe shifting it towards Leffen. Like, I think it would have been amazing if that happened, but of course, history is history. It didn't happen, so it just sucks. But I think that's where a lot of the issues with the documentary come from, because had Leffen won that tournament, all of a sudden there's not sad music playing every time Leffen wins. It's gonna be hype music, because it's like, oh my god, he's really doing it. He's really beating all 5 of the gods, and he's gonna win this tournament, and you know, it just shifts that whole narrative on its head, basically. But that just didn't happen, so it's hard to do. But I don't blame Samox for that at all, because like I said, this was a solo project that took years and years and years to complete. It was basically next to impossible to, well, A, it's always next to impossible to please everybody, but B, it's next to impossible to predict what's gonna happen especially in a game like Melee. Melee is very unpredictable. Everybody knows that. That's like one of the highlights and why people like the game, is because it's never the same. It's always unpredictable and always changing. So to try and predict the storylines that are gonna happen, to try to mold into what is basically like the biggest film documentary of your game that has ever been, it's incredibly hard to do. And I feel incredibly bad for Samox, because I think everybody knows just how hard it is going to be. So props to him for even trying in the first place. Like it takes a lot of balls to even try in the first place. He could have just ended it after the first documentary, said, you know what, everybody pretty much liked it. It was huge for the game. I'm done. I'm not going to touch it anymore. But he wanted to do more. He wanted to continue to do that. He wanted to push the scene to even bigger, and props to him for trying, because it takes a lot of balls to do what he did. That being stated, maybe he missed the mark for a lot of people. I still think that's okay. I think at the end of the day, the documentary was pretty good. Even with all of these things people took issue with, I think it was good. I think, especially because like he said, he's cutting those two parts out, I think all of a sudden it becomes, there's really not too many points of contention after, once he cuts those parts out, that I think were pretty unnecessary. Obviously, the Leffen stuff with the sad music and stuff is still a problem, but again, I think that's kind of a problem that you can't really do anything about because of the way history played out. Overall, I think the documentary was great. I think it had a lot of the same emotion that the first one did, of what it is, what Smash is, what Melee is, and the community around it, and why we love the game. I think that was great. I think personally the Vimeo release is not the smartest move ever for, like, if you wanted to actually grow the scene. That being stated, Samox like has to pay for the documentary. It was a solo project that took years and a lot of money and time. So I do not fault him for releasing on Vimeo like behind a paywall. Like, it makes perfect sense. You got to make your money back, you know? I don't think anybody will blame him for that. Like, it's, you know, you got to do it somehow. It's a big production, takes a lot of time and a lot of money. So honestly, do it. If you need to recoup your costs, do it. That being stated, I do wish it would have been like the original one, where it goes up on YouTube and can be viewed a lot more and stuff. But, you know, maybe in the future that'll happen. Who knows? It's yet to be seen. I mean, this thing just finished releasing yesterday, you know? It's hard to say. But overall, I think the documentary was good. Even with a lot of the problems, I think the problems weren't as bad as people made them out to be. Of course, that's hard to, like, say to Leffen, right? It's hard to go to Leffen and be like, well, it's really not that bad, when he was the one being painted as somebody who hates handicapped people. You know, that's hard to say to him. So I understand why he's justifiably upset by it, because I would be too. I think anybody would be if you were painted in that light, especially when it was you saying stuff at 15 years old. Mango said it himself. Just be happy when you were 15, everything you were saying wasn't being posted and aired out in front of everybody. Because we've all said stuff when we were young that is stupid and that we regret and stuff, you know? And that includes Leffen and Mango. Nobody's perfect, you know? So I understand why they were justifiably pissed. They were young, it was a long time ago, and they're different people now, and the doc doesn't really show that. But I also think, again, it's hard to show that when the last day of filming was in 2015, and a lot of the changes came later on, you know? So all this is to say that I really enjoyed the doc. I strongly suggest, if you haven't seen it, I know it costs money, I know it's on Vimeo, and it's annoying, but just go watch it. It's honestly really good. I think it's, same with the first one, it's great for the game. I don't think it's as good as the first one by any means. I think the narratives are I think it's very different from the first documentary. It's very different, to say the least. I still think it's good, but it's definitely not as good as the first, and I don't think it will be as big as the first. I don't think it will reach as many people, but I still think it will reach people. I still think it will get people interested in the game, and I think at the end of the day, that's all that matters. I think that's what's good for the community, is that that's what the documentary is, and I think that's great. So like I said, if you haven't watched it, please, I highly suggest you go watch it. It's great. It's good content. I highly enjoyed it, even with all of the parts that may have not been the best. Either way though, guys, that's basically all I have to say about it. Go watch Melee. Even if it's not the doc, just watch some Melee tournaments. Right now on Twitch, there is 5 days of Melee going on as this video is being posted over on the BTS Smash channel on Twitch. Go watch them. They're doing 5 days of Melee. Tons and tons of Melee content, from podcasts to tournaments to skits to, they're doing like Jeopardy, and like just so much Melee content from all sorts of really cool and funny people. Highly suggest you go watch it. I know know I will be. Either way though, guys, that's gonna be the end of the video. If you did like it, leave a like down below. Comment if you want to see me talk about more Melee stuff in the future, or if there's anything specifically you want to talk about from the doc. I'd be more than happy to talk to you guys down below. So comment down below if you want to talk about it. If you're new around here, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications for when I post more videos just like this. It's free and you can always unsubscribe later, and it would really help me out. So I'd appreciate if you could do that. Either way though, guys, I thank you and I appreciate you, and I will see you in tomorrow's video. Peace.